Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo! I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. We are here. The season has officially started. Rob Pelinka and JJ Redick kicked it off with part one of Media Day today, Thursday, September 25th. Shout out to the late night gang. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Basketball is back. This is exciting. I am thrilled. Happy to be here with all of you. Going to go about an hour today. Going to talk through a few takeaways from part one of Media Day, some things that we learned. There was a big announcement from Rob Pelinka. And then after going through that, we'll get into the Q&A as always. Also going live on X right now. So going to test out going live on X. Have only been going live on YouTube, and then potentially creating a Twitch account and going live there as well. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. On the road to 30K subscribers before the season starts. We are less than 50 subscribers away from hitting that mark. So would love to hit that, honestly, before Monday, if possible. But we have like a month or so before the season starts. So hoping to hit that by then. But first thing that we have to talk about from today's presser is JJ Redick's extension. And so Rob Pelinka likes to always start his press conferences with a sort of a monologue that he goes through, but whatever he wants to talk about or announce and kind of welcome everybody and just hit some of the main talking points. And at the end, he just casually drops that the Lakers extended JJ Redick after one season. And this is rare for any coach really to be extended after their first season, especially if it didn't result in them winning a championship, but especially for a rookie head coach and a rookie head coach with no prior NBA coaching experience. But this is clearly a leap of faith from the Lakers in terms of their belief in JJ and their confidence. Rob referred to him as a special coach and a special communicator. And I think this is a smart decision from LA. I don't yet have clarity as to the terms of JJ's extension, but I would assume that it aligns him with Rob. Remember, Rob was extended a few months ago. So I would assume they're on the same timeline or more similar timelines than they were before. And this just affirms that JJ is the Lakers coach of not only the present, obviously, but the future as well. And I think it was the right decision. I think JJ had an incredible rookie season compared, just factoring in he had never coached above the youth level before, given being in that coaching seat and having to face the spotlight and scrutiny and the microscope that you're under when you coach the Lakers. And then you're also coaching LeBron and you have to deal with all the podcast narratives, both as a former podcaster, but also LeBron's podcast partner. Then you undergo a major trade with the DFS D'Lo trade. Then you undergo an even bigger trade with the Luka AD trade. Your house burns down in a fire. Like there were so many things that JJ dealt with last season that I think for the most part he navigated exceptionally well and impressively, and was not obviously the best end to the season, and frankly a pretty disappointing end to the season. LA as the 3 seed loses in 5, has home court advantage, is the favorite, and they unceremoniously lose to Minnesota. But I think this was the right move. I think though they didn't frame it as sort of a token or gesture from the new ownership group, I would assume that played some level of part in here of just making sure everybody is aligned on the same page and locked in for years to come. So that was the biggest news by far to come out of today's presser. And I thought it was notable and in my opinion, the right decision, right move. And this just means that JJ is locked in for at least the next, I would assume, 6 years or so as the Lakers head coach. Takeaway number 2 was the buzzword of the day was optionality. And that has been a term that Pelinka likes to use when discussing the Lakers' paths to building the roster and whether they want to make trades or just the both short and long-term view of the group. And so once again, I believe he was asked a question where flexibility was used a couple times and he reframed it to use optionality instead. And the thing that he made clear is that the Lakers are going to be looking on the trade market and they are open to making a trade and even potentially using that first round pick. But it's going to be determined by whether they think that move can really elevate them to a different tier or status within the championship mix. And he specifically noted, as he's done a couple of times in recent media day pressers, like he wants to see what the first 20 to 25 games look like. And that has been, that was what they wanted to do last year. And they ultimately decided that they needed to move on from D'Lo and go get DFS. So I expect, unless something changes here in the next 3 days, right? Like they're going to start media day and training camp with this roster, go into the season with this group, see how good this group is, and then use that first 20, 25 games basically through early to mid-December to determine whether they need to make a move and what type of move they need to make. I still contend that the best version of this team likely features another 3-and-D perimeter guy, and how they go about that. There's various paths. It could be with Rui as the base. It could be with Gabe or Maxi. It could be with a first. It could not be with a first. But I still think they need one more perimeter two-way guy to really hit the ceiling with this group. But sounds like Rob made it clear that they are not only looking toward the future, and that this is a season that they have championship aspirations, they have championship expectations, and they want to go out and win a title if they can. So that'll be something to monitor through the first month and a half of the season. Like, how is this team performing and what are the weaknesses? I think the weakness is going to be the defensive end, and they will at some point realize they need to go out and trade for a better perimeter defender. Number 3 was, Rob reiterated, and this isn't the first time he's said this, but reiterated that the Lakers want LeBron to retire as a Laker, and at least that's their public stance, right? And we could get into some of the stuff with the extension and what happened or didn't happen, what he wanted, what they wanted, but he reiterated that LeBron has the decision, and he's earned that, and it's up to him and his family how much longer he wants to play, whether he wants to retire a Laker or not. But Rob did say that he would love for LeBron to retire a Laker, that he thinks it would be the perfect storybook ending to LeBron's career and his chapter as a Laker. So we'll see what LeBron says on Monday when we talk to him, and what he says about his future and his future with the Lakers specifically. And we'll get some more insight on Monday. But Rob was directly asked if he wants LeBron, or if the Lakers want LeBron to retire as a Laker, and he said yes. So if we take that at face value, then that is, that's what that is. And then fourth and final thing before we get into the Q&A, no update at all on the starting lineup or schematics. I asked JJ a schematics question about the new pieces and just how that would change his perspective on both sides of the ball, and he completely shot me down and was like, hopefully you'll see in the preseason. So no, I tried, but got shot down. Nothing to report on the offensive or defensive end. Like, they talked about how each player fits and what their skill set is, but not really anything concrete in terms of some of the changes. He did mention that he spent a lot of time with Sean McVay, I want to say back in May, and they spoke for about 3 hours. And one of the things he came away with from that conversation was the concept of utility plays, which is a football term, and that he needs to figure out a better way to blend Luka, LeBron, and Austin together, and just figure out the optimal way to make those three work. So I guess that is something we could sort of take away, but it seems like we're either going to get some insight from the players on Monday, or potentially JJ the next time he speaks, which will be Tuesday after the first day of camp. And nothing on the starters. He did say he feels like they have 7 to 8 starting level players, which I would agree with, I guess. I would say probably closer to 6. I think there's a clear top 6 on this roster. You can maybe stretch it 7 to 8, depends. They spoke very highly of Jake LaRavia, so that was another kind of mini takeaway, was both Rob and JJ spoke very highly of Jake, so maybe Jake is that 7th guy. I guess you could throw in Vando and Gabe into that mix as well, so maybe it's 8 or 9. I think it's probably closer to 6, but we'll obviously see in the preseason, training camp, etc. But no updates really in terms of actual basketball stuff, right? It was a lot of talking about the roster construction and some of the stuff with Luka in the offseason. And big thing was JJ talking about championship shape and habits and communication. But again, I wish we had more X's and O's stuff to dive into. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the Q&A here. Shout out to the chat. And actually, one more thing that I forgot to mention in the optionality part was Rob talked about Rui, and Rui was another big talking point, and he was asked directly about Rui and the concept of contract negotiation because Rui is extension eligible, I believe, through October 20th, right before, like the last day before the regular season starts. And Rob, he kind of dodged some of the Rui stuff throughout the presser and was non-committal to discussing Rui's place with the future of the franchise, but he did note that he seemed to imply, my read on it was he was implying that they are negotiating with Rui in terms of an extension. Whether they come to some sort of agreement obviously remains to be seen, but that was my takeaway from that. What was it seemed like he was like, when we have ongoing talks with a player with a contract situation, we're not going to speak on that publicly. So I think if they were not at least having a conversation with Rui and his side, I don't think that happens. But again, we have about 3.5 weeks till we know whether Rui signs an extension or not. Pugzilla, Yo Sparks Buha. Shout out to Rose Sparks for being my first official sponsor. Had them on the show, sponsored the episode a couple days ago with Trevor Lane. So shout out to Rose Sparks for kicking things off in my partnership era. Jay Os Laker says, yo, Jovan, Jake Laravia, or yo, Jake Laravia. What up? Quabena Asar says, Jovan looks like Jake Laravia twin. I really don't see it, but I guess enough people see it that I don't know. Maybe I'm blind. Sam Davison, that ad was insane. Look, man, I'm a believer in sexual health and sex positivity, so it was only right for my first ad. All right, do you guys have any questions? Kevin Cambridge says, JB, you don't look like Jake, y'all just white. I think that's honestly it, but Muhan says, did they talk about the starting five? They were asked directly. I believe it was Kobe Price of the Southern California News Group who asked JJ about it. And he said he wouldn't divulge it and that there are 7 to 8 starting level players on this team and that he doesn't think it's a big deal. I've talked about this before. Coaches and front office people love to downplay the starting lineup, but it matters to players. It matters to the identity of a team. Like, that is supposed to be your best lineup that is going up against an opponent's best lineup. And that sets a tone and dictates how you're going to start games. And then I think it also matters to the fan base, but it really matters to the players because that dictates contracts. Like, starters get paid more than bench players. So especially with so many guys in this situation and on this team in contract years, like, it is going to matter. Like, whether Rui comes off the bench or starts is going to matter for his future. Whether Austin comes off the bench or starts, whether Marcus Smart and down the road, like, or down the line, excuse me, that's going to matter. So like, it is what it is. They can downplay it or deny it. Like, starting matters to these guys. So it will be a big decision ultimately whenever they unveil the starting group, which we might not know until next Friday. Easy peasy. Thoughts on the Dalton comments? So the final question of the presser was a question about Dalton and his hot start last year into his close to the season and then his struggles in summer league, and JJ said he felt like Dalton did too much after the season and that he was in the gym at 5 a.m. working out and shooting and then doing a couple of workouts with the player development and training staff. So I thought that was interesting and not something that I had heard in terms of how hard Dalton was working. So I thought that was a positive and a good thing to take away. He said that they had just done some conditioning drills and tests, and Dalton was smoking everybody and was by far the fastest and most in shape person. And that, like, really, I guess if we could take away one thing from the basketball side, JJ was really harping on championship shape. And that was something he mentioned during exit interviews and what was a big thing. And of course, at the time, everyone was focusing on Luka. But as I said at the time, I didn't think it was just about Luka being in championship shape. I thought it applied to several players. And then also championship shape is not just physical championship shape. I think it's mental shape. I think it is emotional shape. And I felt at times in that series against Minnesota, several guys were either wound too tight or not wound tight enough, and just the team was not right mentally or emotionally, to say nothing of physically, where LeBron was banged up, Austin was banged up, Luka had his whole situation with game 3 and game 4 on the road. So clearly not in the best physical or championship shape in that regard, but I thought it went beyond that. So it sounds like Dalton's in pretty good shape, and it sounds like, based on what JJ was saying, he's in the right mind frame and just is in a better place mentally compared to where he was at the end of last season, or maybe even in summer league. So I think, as JJ said at one point, that he quoted Nick Saban, like, show me, don't just tell me. And I think that's where I'm at. And it seems like that's where the Lakers are at with Dalton as well, where it's like, okay, like, I mean, I think based on what JJ was saying, it sounds like he's been showing them all off season, regardless of his summer league performance. But now it is like, show everybody in training camp and in the preseason about the improvements, about where you're at, and that for whatever reason you had your summer league struggles, but that's behind you and you're moving forward as a clear rotation player on this team. So I think I walked away encouraged by what JJ said about Dalton. Again, I want to see it, and I think that will ultimately dictate my feelings on and perspective on Dalton. Right now, I think there are probably 9 clear rotation guys on this team, some version of the starting lineup. I think there's 6 guys for that, and you could pick whichever 5 you want. Then the 6th guy being likely Marcus or Rui. And then you have Vando, Gabe, and Jake LaRavia. Again, Jake LaRavia was like been raved about by a bunch of people, and seemed like Rob and JJ were singing his praises. So I think those are the top 9 for now. And then the 10th spot, we haven't even mentioned a backup center yet. That's where Jackson Hayes and Maxi Kleba come in. So like Dalton has to go out and beat Jake LaRavia, who's a much better defender, a better playmaker and ball handler than him, or Vando, who's a much better defender, or Gabe, who's a much better defender as well. So like he's got some real competition in terms of the perimeter bench role, in beating out at least one, if not multiple, of those guys. So we'll see if he could do it, and maybe the Lakers just downsize and go a bit smaller, or maybe they go with 11 guys, including a backup and Dalton. But overall, I would say I was encouraged by what JJ said about Dalton. Thank you for the super chat again. Another one from Alicia Clark Jones. Thank you for the super chat. I'm still in preseason form. Do you think LeBron will ask for a trade by the deadline? I would say no. I think LeBron is going to play out this year with the Lakers, and then there's a whole conversation about what's going to happen next summer, and we'll see on Monday if we get any clarity as to LeBron's future plans. Is he going to play another year? Like it did seem like in that complex interview he recently did with Speedy that he seems to be leaning toward playing at least one more year, if not longer, but not much longer. So it feels like there's a lot of ways that can play out. I think that the more interesting thing for me is if LeBron is going to be a Laker next offseason. And I don't have a great feel or clarity on that yet. I feel like if I had to project it one way or the other, I would project it more so not. But like I think it's very close to 50-50 at this point. And, that's more just like a gut reaction based on how everything has played out this summer, at least publicly. So I think it's close, but I don't think he asks out by the deadline. Like I think the one thing I've said before, I think like 2 things would have to happen for him to ask out by the deadline. One would be this would have to be his final year. He would have to announce that at some point here, either on media day or right before media day. This is my final year. And then 2, the Lakers would have to be so far out of the West race or like looking like a play-in team around the deadline. And then it's maybe just like, okay, this is LeBron's final year. He wants to compete, fight for a championship and end his career on a competitive note. The Lakers are, for whatever reason, not in that position. Maybe at that point, either they do him the courtesy or he just asks out. And that's like a way I could see it playing out. But that it requires LeBron only playing one more year. And again, we don't know that yet. And then two, that would also require the Lakers really underperforming either due to injuries or just fit or whatever. Like, various things could happen. So I think those are two giant ifs that I do not foresee happening. But I think that's like the one path to maybe LeBron asking out around the deadline. Shopping cart, are things with LeBron any better? Need my GOAT in LA. I think they have gotten better. And I mentioned LeBron retiring or Lakers wanting LeBron to retire as a Laker. And one thing that JJ talked about that I found interesting was he said that he and LeBron spoke all offseason and that they were in constant communication and that they also met up twice. Once in the Hamptons, which JJ has a summer house in the Hamptons that he often goes out to. So he said that he met with LeBron around the free agency time and they had a good conversation then. And then they recently just met up in LA. So JJ said LeBron's in a really great spot mentally and that like he's been on board with everything, because the question that actually preceded that was, or the question that led to that answer was asking about the transfer of power from LeBron to Luka, and if there's been any conversations with LeBron about having to accept that he is no longer the face of the franchise or the clear face of the franchise. Like obviously there's been a shift toward Luka. So that was JJ's response to that. So I would say the funny thing with these is like I've now been to, I don't even know how many press conferences throughout my career, 50 plus. And of course, like, even when things aren't great, you're not going to say that publicly. You're not going to be like, well, LeBron's upset, right? Like, it's just not how this is going to go. So there's always some element of like, we're taking what they're saying at face value and operating off of that. I think we'll have a better sense on Monday where LeBron's at mentally. But I think things have gotten better. I think around the time of the statement, there was some drama, right? And there's different accounts as to what was offered, what wasn't offered, what LeBron wanted, what the Lakers wanted, and ultimately it led to him opting in. But I think now it seems like things are in a much better place. And again, I think the bigger question with LeBron is how much longer is he playing, and is that going to be as a Laker or in a different uniform? Kane Carter. What up, Kane? I also like that they moved the account names back rather than the dumb YouTube usernames. So Ken Carter asked Jovan, what is the worst archetype of a player? I think the worst archetype of a player is a bench gunner or just a gunner in general who doesn't play defense, takes a bunch of bad shots, is an inefficient scorer, and yet who carries himself like an all-star or like a franchise player. And a lot of those guys, I feel like they have the ball handling and playmaking skills to be not necessarily a point guard or a lead guard, but to be at least like a secondary playmaker, ball handler. And sometimes they do naturally just kind of walk into 4 or 5 assists a night. But I feel like if they were willing to view themselves in a different light and take a step back offensively and realize like, I'm probably more of like a third or fourth option on like a real contender. If they bought into that and were more focused on how can I create high percentage looks for my teammates, how could I refine my shot selection and not be taking like step back contested threes or step back mid-range jumpers, I think that type of player to me is the worst, because like they have the potential to do more than they often do, and they end up just being bad stats or good stats, bad teams guys, when they could be solid stats, good teams guys, but they just don't want to do that. So I feel like the guy who's like talented and skilled enough to contribute to a winning situation, but would rather put up numbers and just be on shitty teams, like that to me is the worst player archetype. The other one is my biggest pet peeve is shooters who can't shoot. So like guys who we label as shooters, but then they're like league average or like slightly above. And it's like, that's not shooter. Like you got to be at a certain volume. You got to be at a certain percentage for me to consider you an elite shooter. And I think there's a lot of elite shooters who are actually solid to good shooters, but we label them as such. In defense of the genre, 1022. I missed it. Did JJ mention who they chose to lead player development? There was no real discussion on that. He mentioned a little bit about empowering some of his assistants, but there's the shift over the offseason that there was no. So that might be something I ask about next week at training camp. I'm seeing some names in the chat. I'm not going to comment on some of these player names, but you guys are along the same lines. Dress to impress. Let's just address this because this is going to be a thing. Can they have a shot at Walker Kessler? Sure, but I don't think the Walker Kessler situation has changed much. Like there's obviously the recent development with his status with restricted free agency, but I think that's more so the state of restricted free agency, where if a player goes to restricted free agency, I mean, we just saw there's never been a situation like this where we have multiple restricted free agents who are in gridlock with their teams this late into the offseason. And I think there needs to be a revampment with restricted free agency and how it just really screws over the players and locks them into these situations that really favors the team and gives the team no incentive to offer a market value contract to these guys. And it becomes, if a player's worth 25, but there's no other team to offer that to them, the team could just draw a line at like, we're offering you 18 and we're not going above that. And then that leads to these situations where there's a standoff all off season. A team like Golden State, like this isn't just affecting Golden State and Kuminga. This is affecting Al Horford and the Anthony Melton and Seth Curry. And like it's having this ripple effect that doesn't just affect the direct player and team and sort of their dynamic, but it's like there are multiple guys right now technically out of a job because of this whole system and the setup. So I think it's a bit ridiculous. It's finally been exposed this summer, and I think there needs to be some real discussion and changes to restricted free agency moving forward. But I think this is more so Utah and Kessler disagreeing on his value and maybe some hardball there, and then him being a restricted free agent next summer. Now, does that lead to him going elsewhere or them realizing maybe we need to trade him? That's certainly a possibility, but I think this is more so just going to be another situation where he's a restricted free agent next year. There are going to be some teams with cap space, so I would be interested to see if anyone tries to do a poison pill or tries to sign him to a mega contract. But I think this ultimately is just him staying in Utah. It's just going to be a little bit of a standoff until they can figure out what's a fair contract for Kessler. So, I mean, my understanding is the price for Kessler has not changed, and they want at least 2 first-round pick values for him. So if that's the case, the Lakers don't have that. Like they don't have 2 firsts to trade as of right now. Lee Baggy, thank you for the super chat. Can't wait to see Jovan come off the bench and give us buckets. Look, all I ask is like 10% of what Jake is making. Maybe a little more, but yeah. Well, we'll pull a Marcus and Markeith, and he'll do a post game show. I'll check in and we'll see how that goes. Sam Davison, the apron world changed a lot. Yeah, it did. At the same time, I think there have been situations where people use that as an excuse, and there are still things you could do in like teams. Smart front offices are still making smart moves in this new apron world. So I think it's still possible. Roberto Carlos asked, did they talk about Thero? They did not. Of note, Rob was asked if everyone's going to be available, and he said they're all going through their physicals right now to determine their availability for training camp. So that is more of a media day question or first day of camp question, but that will be something we ask about. Like my understanding, he's been in the gym, he's been working out, he's fine, he's cleared, but we'll obviously get that clarification on hopefully on Monday. Kane Carter, Jovan, in your eyes, why do you / first athletic leap guards tend to age out faster than finesse guys. For example, D Rose, Russ, Monte Ellis, John Morant, even Zion and Blake Griffin to an extent. I think it's the wear and tear on your body. And I think Kobe said it, if I'm not mistaken, but I think this has been a common refrain that multiple players have said at times, but like you only have so many jumps in your body. And I think these guys that jump a lot and are like, just think about the way that John Morant comes down the lane and throws himself at the basket and how many violent collisions he's had in air and then both landing on the hardwood. Like that's a tough style of play. So it is exciting. It's exhilarating. It's why those guys are all like D Rose. People still talk about prime D Rose in Chicago. Russ has a cultish fan base. Monte Ellis has a cultish, maybe not cultish fan base, but like there are a lot of people who fondly think about Monte Ellis, and he's someone who like was never an all-star or franchise guy, but his name has carried weight throughout the years because of his style of play and because of his numbers. Ja, obviously pre-social media stuff was got one of the last players to get a major signature shoe. Zion, Blake, those are two of the better debuts from bigs we've seen over the last like 15 years. So these guys have it's almost like running backs, I guess, to make a cross sport analogy here. Feels like the athletic players are kind of similar to running backs in that there is probably a shorter career, a shorter prime. Like Russ, I would even put to the side from these guys because Russ did have a sustained career longer than any of these guys so far in terms of excellence and all-star, all-NBA, all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just they compare more so to running backs where there is a shorter shelf life because of the style of play. I also think a big thing with so I think a guy who was able to transition out of this player archetype to an extent was Vince Carter, who obviously one of the best dunkers of all time, one of the most athletic players of all time, but he transitioned later in his career to being more of a shooter and more of an off-ball player. And I think one thing I would note with all these guys, though, Blake did really improve as a shooter late in his career, is none of these guys ever developed jumpers to the extent that they needed to. Like D Rose did become a better shooter also in his career, but with Russ, Monte Ellis was always an inefficient guy, high volume guy. Ja, the jumper's been inconsistent. So like, I think that's kind of a big thing here too, is like you need to be able to shoot if you're transitioning to like a role player phase. And I feel like with all these guys, they were always so athletic and so ball dominant that it made that transition hard for them. In defense of the genre, 1022, putting me on the spot here. Who's the NBA player equivalent to Drake? Well, depends how you feel about Drake, right? Because I'm obviously a big Drake fan, so I have a fond comparison to him. People have made the comparison of Drake and LeBron, and I see that. I think that the one kind of limitation, like I think the versatility and the ability to, with Drake, he can make just about any type of music, and with LeBron, I think he's arguably the most versatile player of all time. He's played point guard, he's played center, he's played wing. He could do just about anything on a basketball floor. I think the one issue, in my opinion, with the comparison is that LeBron is considered the greatest of all time, or at least the second greatest by most. I don't think Drake is on that level for a lot of people. Like, if you're a Drake stan, sure, but I think hip hop, it's a little bit more subjective in terms of where someone's standing is. So like he's by far the most successful commercial artist in rap, but not, I don't think a lot of people have him in their top 5 or top 10. So that's like the difference, I guess. I'm trying to think. I don't really know who, like, it would have to be someone who's versatile because Drake can rap and sing and, genre hop a bit. Like, I don't know who that equivalent would be, but would be interested to see what you guys think. And come on, man, don't the Karl Malone stray here. That's a little bit too far. A little too far. Young Lido, what's going on with Christian Wood? Any news on him returning to the NBA? That is not a name I've heard in a while, so no updates on my end. Chris Jarvina says clearly Gabe Vincent is Drake. They look exactly the same. I'm saying looks, sure, but Nicholas asks, hasn't M sold more? I think M might have M is another one for me. Like that. I mean, that was Eminem Show was my first album. Surprise. I was like 9 years old when that dropped, and that was first rap album I ever heard, and hell of an album to be welcomed into to rap with. He might have sold more. He's obviously had more albums and just more longevity over the totality of his career than Drake. Drake is like the streaming stuff. Obviously, Drake. I think really only The Weeknd and Bad Bunny and like Taylor Swift, Beyonce. Like Drake's at that level of pop streaming, but even in several categories, he's number one. So I guess it depends how you factor in streaming into this. And we're obviously in the streaming era, and people aren't buying albums, or it converts based on streams. So depends how you want to look at it. But I guess M is in the conversation for most commercial rapper. But the difference with M and Drake, I think, is M is in a lot of top 5 conversations, top 3, top 10, whatever. So I think that's the difference between them as well. Ken Carter, Jovan, how'd you rank Bron as a shooter throughout his career? When would you say he became a respectable shooter and eventually a sniper? I think there was a big difference in his shooting in Miami. That's when I think he really took a step, and then it just continued into Cleveland and then in LA. But that was like the final 2 things for LeBron, I felt like, were his 3-point shooting and being able to do it at a high volume and a high level, and then also the post game. And I think he made big strides in Miami, and those became strengths of his, and then it's continued, especially as a Laker, I think, just growing as a 3-point shooter. And like, again, at this point, really, like the only thing that's I feel like this is a story for someone who wants to write it and get the access to LeBron. Like the only real knock on his game that he's never really conquered has been free throw shooting. That's like the one thing you can say with LeBron, is he's always been high 60s, low 70s, low to mid 70s. But outside of free throw shooting, I feel like LeBron has reached a point where like he's at least solid at every, like, clearly one of the best passers of all time, one of the best scorers of all time, has grown as a shooter, as a post-up guy, like thinking about him bullying the Warriors during those finals runs and really keeping Cleveland, especially like 2018, like keeping them in a lot of those games when it was just such a mismatch talent-wise. Like he's been able to do it, like defensively, almost won a Defensive Player of the Year, multiple all-defense first teams, and just being a Swiss Army knife on that end. Like, just not really much you can criticize. Ashik asks, what do you make of the utility plays comment? Does JJ want the ball less in Luka's hands going forward? I really like this question, and I'm glad that we are advancing this, because that was one of my takeaways, I guess, to kind of bring it back to, like, we didn't get an explicit, I want to do less pick and roll, I want to do more stack actions, more horns actions, I want to switch less. Like, I was hoping to get a little bit more of an identity and just more clarity as to the way that JJ envisions this all. But I did take, when he was asked about LeBron, Luka, and Austin together, and just having a full offseason to think about how those 3 will work off of each other, he mentioned the term sharing, and that being a big thing in terms of sharing the ball, sharing the spotlight, sharing responsibility, sharing leadership, and then also mentioned the conversations with Sean McVay and the whole utility plays. So I do think that part of it will be having Luka play off the ball a little bit more. We saw some of that with Slovenia. We did see some of that last year. They had that chase 77 action where he would come off a couple pin downs. And I think just the having less of a workload on Luka, where he can still have the ball in crunch time and still have the ball to close most possessions. But can you have Austin bring the ball up the floor? Can you have Gabe bring the ball up the floor? Marcus? Can you have some sort of decoy action, or just maybe Luka is bringing up the ball, but then he's handing it off into someone, to someone else, and then going into something that then leads to, okay, we're going to test a couple things, and then if we can't break the defense, we're going to end the possession with a Luka, DeAndre Ayton high pick and roll. Like, I just think more variation in different ways of getting into actions. That to me is the key to keeping Austin and LeBron engaged and involved offensively, and not just being, hey, this is the Luka show, we're going to run a bunch of high pick and roll, everybody just spot up and be ready to either catch and shoot on threes or catch and attack a closeout. Like that is not the style of play that I think is going to lead to the best results with this roster. If they change the roster in the future, then that could potentially work. But as long as you have the playmaking, ball handling, and shot creation from LeBron and Austin, I think you need to empower that more and make sure those guys are involved and being utilized to their capabilities. And of course, everyone's got to sacrifice to an extent. And that's just how these things work. There's only, as people love to say, there's only one basketball. But I think they did maybe shift it a little bit too much in the Luka direction. And I think there needs to be a shift back into a more egalitarian style of offense where, again, I think Luka should still be the leading scorer, the leading field goal attempt guy, the leading usage guy. Like Luka's the best player. Luka should have the ball the most, but I think there could be a little bit of a better balance. That's more so my point, and I think that's what JJ was trying to say. Greg King, give a percentage on us getting Wiggins. Sometimes I see these questions and I don't want to answer them, but you know what? You could throw me in the fire and answer. 25%, 30%. I would put it certainly under 50%, right? Because if I'm saying over 50%, then I think it's going to happen. As of right now, I would put it certainly under 50%, but it really, I think the way that percent goes up dramatically, I think one of two things happens. Either one, the Lakers underperform, though I do think they have a relatively easier schedule to start the year compared to previous years where I could see them getting out to like a 7-3, 8-2, or even like extrapolating that out, 13-4, 13-5, whatever record, where that first 20, 25 games that Rob mentioned, if they underperform during that, that's where maybe there's more pressure to make a move for Wiggins or for someone else. So either LA underperforms and or Miami underperforms. I think that's really realistic. I don't think Miami, I think they're more of like a play-in-esque team, and that's before even looking at the Tyler Hero injury and how long that's going to affect their start to the season and just like the lingering impact of that. So I think this could be a different percentage come December or January, but for now, I would peg it at around like 25, 30%, because I still think they're a bit a ways away in terms of the actual trade package in what Miami wants versus what LA wants. I said this yesterday on the Great Western Forum show. I think there's been a game of chicken going on, and I think they had the initial dalliance earlier in the summer, and then you had the recent reports from the Lakers side coming out of they're open to taking on money, they're open to investing in this team, and Andrew Wiggins was specifically mentioned by a couple people, and then you have the Miami side come back out with, well, we don't want to trade Wiggins, and we're happy with our roster. And so like that's how these things go in the media, where there's the back and forth with Lakers are trying to test Miami. What's your asking price? Miami's trying to push back and say our asking price is high, and like they go back and forth. So right now I'd still peg it around like 25% or so, but I think come December, depending on where the Lakers are at and where the Heat are at, that could certainly skyrocket into being more likely than not potentially. Kurt Affair, how many times have you seen Drake live? 7, I want to say 6 or 7. I've seen him live a lot. So yeah, I've tried to go to every show he's done in LA. Like not literally every show, but anytime he's in LA, I try to see him at least one of the shows. Kane Carter, Jovan, how'd you rank Bron as a shooter when you say he turned a corner as a shooter? When would you say he became a legit sniper? I mean, I'll just look at the data quickly to back this up, because I would have to, I want to speak with facts here. So the big shift with LeBron as a shooter came 2012-13 in Miami. He shot 40.6%, so almost 41% on threes, only 3 per game, which was a decent number for back then, but obviously like a lower number now. In terms of like high volume, I mean, in 2021-22, so that was the Russ year, the first Russ year, he shot 36%, which is around league average, maybe a little bit higher depending on the year, but on 8 attempts per game. So that's still the most threes he's taken per game. Then the following year, 7 per game, which is high, but only shot 32%. Then the last 2 years, 41% on 5 attempts, 38% on 6 attempts. So I would say there was a real shift in his attempts when he got to LA, he's basically been at 6+ attempts in 6 of the 7 seasons, and including 4 seasons above 6. But in terms of, there has been a fluctuation with his percentages. Like, again, going back to Miami, there was a couple years, 41, 38. Then in LA, it's been 34, 35, 37, 36, 32, 41, 38. So I think overall, like, sniper is maybe to go back to my point earlier about shooting. Like, I don't know if I'd call him a sniper per se, but he's a really good shooter, and that is like one of the final flaws in his game that he clearly overcame. Mebe, hey Jovan, what is the current situation with a Rui extension? So it sounded, based on what Rob said, that like there are ongoing discussions. They have until October 20th to come to an extension. So I had not heard of anything. We do know the Lakers like to keep things under wraps, and they just extended JJ a couple, or whenever it was unclear whether it was a few days, a week, couple weeks, whatever, but they kept that under wraps. There was no, I had not heard anything from anyone on that, and that was not reported anywhere. So the Lakers do operate behind a curtain sometimes, and it seems like, based on the Rui situation in Rob's comments, that maybe something is coming. But I would be really interested in the number, because I think Rui, to me, deserves a bump, but like, how high is that bump? And if Rui, like, there's a big difference between Rui at 20 million versus Rui at 25 million, right? So right now he's making about 18.2. So maybe he gets a bump up to like in the 20s or low 20s, but anything higher, and that's real money that you're committing to him. That's like starting level money. And I think then we have a different conversation with the starting group, because it's like you're probably not paying a bench guy to, like, I guess there's exceptions like Naz Reid in Minnesota, and maybe Rui becomes like the hyper 6-man in that way or something. But I am interested to see what ends up happening with Rui in this contract extension, because I had heard nothing behind the scenes on that front. And if anything, I'd heard it was looking more like they were not going to come to some sort of agreement. Kurt Affair, Jovan, what do you think of the younger buses spinning off to their own consulting agency? I think it's cool. I think like no real big thoughts on it, other than like I got the press release and I tweeted it out, and I think it's cool that they're doing something outside of the Lakers and trying to form an identity and looking at like the future of, obviously the sale is going to go through at some point here in the next few months, by the end of the year. And at that point, they'll be wealthier, but of course, it is a change with the percent of the team that they own, and just sort of the dynamic to some extent. We don't know to what extent yet, but to some extent things will be a little bit different. So I think for them figuring out something to do outside of just the Lakers ecosystem, I think is smart, and I'm interested to see where they take it. Because I do think when we look at the Lakers over the last decade, and a lot of their hits have been draft related, have been scouting related, and both Joey and Jesse Buss have been big parts of that. So I know like people can have, I see the comments and stuff, and people will have various opinions about them, but I will say, like, if you look at the Carusos and the Zubatses and a lot of the Austin Reeves and like the successes that the Lakers have had over the last decade on the drafting and identifying talent front, the Buss brothers are a really big part of that, if not the primary driving force. Catching up here on the chat. Chris Jarvina, where do you put the Rockets in the West without Fred VanVleet? I have I think a contrarian opinion with the Rockets, where, so I could see their regular season ceiling being lower, and maybe there's still a chance that they have so much young talent in tradable contracts and draft assets that there is a path to, I was just listening earlier today to Bill Simmons and Zach Lowe talking through it. And like, what if they go get a Derek White? Like, what if Boston's like, we're kind of taking a couple of gap years here. We're not really set up to contend, even if Jason Tatum makes a perfect return at the end of this season or early next season. Like, we need to, if we can get a couple picks or 2-3 picks, whatever, for Derek White, and move on from him, like if they get Derek White, then I think Houston's actually probably in a better spot. I think Derek White's a better player than Fred VanVleet. So I think the regular season, they clearly take a step back, and I had them, I think, probably second in the West in the regular season, not second in terms of odds of coming out of the conference. So I think that nudges them down to maybe 3 or 4, maybe 4. But where I think it is going to be interesting to see, and again, it's dependent on their next move, is, to me, one of my concerns with Houston in a playoff context, and I think I've talked about this before, we saw it at the end of the regular season against the Lakers, is due to Şengün's defensive limitations and Fred VanVleet's defensive limitations. Like Fred VanVleet, I think overall is a positive defender, but he's 6 feet. And there's just a limitation to being like, he's a fire hydrant and he could get into guys' bodies, and he can be someone that's like tough to back down or whatever. And he could be an active defensive playmaker, but there's just a limitation to how good you can be defensively in a playoff setting at 6 feet tall. And I could be being generous, he could be even closer to 5'11". So looking at them having 2 major entry points into their defense with VanVleet and Şengün, they needed so much from Thompson and Smith and Durant and Eason and Dorian Finney-Smith to offset that my fear, and where I felt like this was potentially going to go down the road, was them having to pick between VanVleet and Şengün in terms of closing. And of course, Şengün is the second best player on the team right now and had an amazing summer at Eurobasket. So Şengün's going to be the one out there, similar to a Jokic or a Sabonis. Like, he's too important despite the limitations defensively. So it was really going to be eventually benching Fred VanVleet and probably closing with some combination of Thompson, Durant, Smith, Finney-Smith, and Eason. And I would assume Thompson and Durant are the locks, and then it comes down to Smith versus Eason versus DFS. So I felt like they were heading toward that direction eventually, of potentially having to bench Fred VanVleet in like serious moments, because just thinking about, if you have Şengün and Fred VanVleet out there against OKC or against Denver, they're going to spam the shit out of actions against those two guys and involve them in pick and rolls, and Şengün in the pick and roll and Fred VanVleet in pick and rolls. Like, Shea is going to cook both of them. Jokic is going to cook both of them. Jamal Murray is going to cook both of them. J-Dub's going to cook both of them. It's just, it's problematic. So I think this was eventually and we saw that in that game against the Lakers, where they had to bench actually both Fred VanVleet and Şengün and go with the all wings lineup to close. And they almost won the game. They lost, but I think that was the way this was headed. So in a way, I'm almost like kind of trial by fire. I'm a little bit more bullish on their playoff odds in a way. I also want to see what they do. Maybe they get, like, I think Derek White would fit in perfectly and be like the optimal guy to add. But I'm kind of, in a weird way, more bullish about their playoff odds and lower on them in the regular season. Kane Carter, does the hero injury make trading Wiggins to the Lakers easier? I think so. I think it makes it more likely that Miami underperforms. BDA Pink, they won't extend Rui when there's possible trade targets out there to upgrade the wing position. I'm glad you made this point, because one thing here with potentially extending Rui is, if they extend Rui, remember, anytime there's an extension, you cannot be traded for 6 months. So if they extend Rui, Rui's not being traded this year. And that is a major salary and just, potential trade chip that the Lakers would be taking off. Like, I would argue among the realistic guys that the Lakers would be trading, Rui's arguably the best player or the most enticing player. So to take that out of the equation, that could signify multiple things. It could signify they just don't really love the trade market. They don't feel like that missing piece is out there. It obviously signifies that they love Rui and want him to be a part of the core. And there are people within the big decision makers that are really fond of Rui within LA's ecosystem. But it also just, like, that takes Rui off the board. Like, at that point, you're just trying to trade Gabe or Maxey or Dalton and then the picks. Like, that's all you got to move. So it would be a really big development if they end up extending Rui, because that would wipe that out in terms of him potentially being traded this season. Thomas, sorry, I know you asked one at the top and I think I missed it, but what do you think about these trade ideas for Lakers, Vincent and Connect for the Hornets for Green and Jeffries, Vincent Kleba and Connect to the Suns for Allen, Richards, and Goodwin? Shout out Jordan Goodwin. Between the two, I think I like the latter one better. For people who have listened to me, I am a Jordan Goodwin fan. Like I just think he's a good player and was really impactful for the Lakers last year. Like certainly in a certain role, you don't want him more than like your 9th or 10th guy, but I think he had some really useful moments last season. And then you're upgrading Kleba to Richards. Yeah, I mean, I guess, but between the two, I would lean more toward the second one. I'm not the biggest Nick Richards guy, and I felt like seeing him get traded to Phoenix and like just felt like that didn't really make a difference. And then they went out and got multiple centers this offseason. So feels like he might have been a little, I don't want to say exposed, but like I feel like a lot of times when guys are in lottery situations, we look at them through this optimistic lens, and then they get traded to a situation where there's higher expectations, and then we see if they sink or swim. And it felt like, I don't want to say he sank, but like he wasn't the difference maker that I think Phoenix or other people expected him to be going there. And now look, Phoenix has been a disaster, so maybe it's hard to separate how much of that's Nick Richards versus the Suns. But between those two, I would lean the second one. Golden says Drew would be a good pickup for the Rockets. Drew would be a great pickup. Sporks, who you reached out to me on X as well, and I see we got the X icon here. Hey, Jovan, any chance you got an extra media pass for Tuesday? I do not, unfortunately. I do not get extra media passes. Even getting, like, when I was at The Athletic, additional people from The Athletic in was sometimes a bit of a chore, a bit of a process. So unfortunately, I do not. But if I did, I would hook you up. But unfortunately, I don't. Shabugan, shout out to Shabugan. Thank you for the super chat. Are you still looking to make an announcement about your future, or is the block the future? Okay, we're putting me on the spot an hour in with a giant audience. Shout out to all of you. Over 3,000 on X and over 300 on YouTube. What I can say about this is I actually answered this on a mailbag a couple weeks ago, so I'll just reiterate what I said. There was a situation that at one point in the summer I thought was going to come to fruition, and it unfortunately did not. There was some... I guess the most I could share is like the person who was supposed to hire me left and kind of like it was at the 1 yard line, and then they just left and went somewhere else. So that changed that process, and it ended up not, it kind of restarted, and then they ended up just not hiring anybody. So that was a bit frustrating. And at that time I was going to be bringing my channel over, and that was like a big thing for me, was maintaining the channel, and would be licensing it through a second party. But so for now, it's the block is the future, man. And just looking at the state of the industry right now, like, not to get too inside baseball on the media front, but like, I think I'm in a great spot. Like, I just went to media day today, and there were not many people who were there representing themselves and like their own outlet, if any, right? So everyone there was working for someone else. I'm working for myself. So I think, fortunately, I've been able to carve out a lane here and continue to grow and build it, and want to continue to just do more with this platform. So I think right now, like, I'm open to possibilities in the future, and if the right thing comes around, like, definitely a big shift for me and how I've rebranded myself is like, I'm not interested in writing anymore, and I do not miss writing. And I do not miss the beat writer life in that regard. So I think the thing for me is podcasting, TV, and also owning my stuff. So as long as I do that, then I'm open to partnering with whoever, as long as it's the right fit. But appreciate you asking. In defense of the genre, 1022 needs some block merch. Block merch is coming. It actually have a call tonight about it. I'm excited about who I'm partnering with on that, and hoping to have it by mid-month. Also, memberships are coming. Memberships are coming October 1st. So excited for that. I'm going to go a few more minutes here, and then I will wrap. So get your questions in, get your super chats in. Ken Carter, Jovan, do you think Rui is kind of overrated by the fan base? He can shoot and score a bit, but has weaknesses that hurt the team, and it makes the fit clunky on defense with Luka/LeBron, not a perimeter guy. I think there's a lot of nuance with this question in my answer. I don't think Rui is overrated. I think what people, I've been on, for those who don't know, I've been very vocal about what I think the starting lineup should be, and looking at it through the lens of DeAndre Ayton, Luka, and LeBron are like the three clear starting locks. I would also argue Austin is a fourth starting lock, but I know some people have argued against that. So I've entertained that argument and tried to poke holes in it. And just looking at what the Lakers need around Ayton, Luka, and LeBron, they need guys who could defend the backcourt. DeAndre Ayton defends centers. Luka and LeBron are front court defenders. It's a weird, and it kind of reminds me of Orlando, where their two primary ball handlers are Franz and Paolo, and those guys are like guards offensively, but they are forward and almost big men sized guys defensively. And that's the same thing the Lakers have with Luka and LeBron. LeBron is best defending fours and even some fives. We've seen him defend Jokic. We've seen him defend Şengün. We've seen him defend Sabonis. Luka is best on the non-threat and being more of an off-ball guy against front court guys. So that could even be some backcourt guys, but you don't want, like the example I continually bring up is like, if they're playing Cleveland, are you putting Luka on Darius Garland or Donovan Mitchell? Like, that is not setting up Luka for success. That's not setting up the defense for success. You need two perimeter guys out there. And in my opinion, Marcus Smart and Austin Reeves are the two right answers. Austin is the third best player on the team, the third most productive player. And JJ doubled down on that today and said he's been the best player in the gym. And obviously LeBron and Luka have not been in the gym, but he said he's been clearly the best player every day in scrimmaging. And I don't think the Lakers have, like, if they had a Danny Green or KCP type to replace Austin, that's one thing. That's not Jared Vanderbilt. That's not Marcus Smart. And that's not Rui. So to bring it back to Rui, I don't think he's overrated. I think there's maybe a misunderstanding of what the Lakers need from that starting spot. And I've seen a lot of people focus on the offensive end and be like, well, Rui can shoot and he can play off the ball. And like, that stuff's great. But the Lakers' issue is the defensive end. Like, this group defended at a league worst level with the big three on the floor. And the way that's going to improve is not benching Austin. That's not the right solution. The solution is getting better defenders around those three and guys who can maximize their offensive strengths and skill set. And that starts, in my opinion, with Marcus Smart and DeAndre Ayton, and then figuring out the rest of the rotation from there. So I don't think Rui's overrated necessarily. I just think that there's maybe a misunderstanding of his defensive limitations, and people are not thinking about the fact that the Lakers need two backcourt defenders out there. And I think if Austin is we saw a big shift with Austin last year when he started the season off with D'Lo. They're asking too much of him defensively. Like, Austin should not be the primary guy defensively against backcourt guys. When they inserted Max and Austin was the secondary guy, you saw a big shift in his production. I thought he defended better. And I think that's what Marcus Smart does. Is Marcus Smart is kind of that Max role, not the same player, but like that will unlock Austin. Austin's fine as a secondary guy. You just don't want him as the primary guy. And we've seen him have to guard Steph and Jamal Murray and Ant Edwards in the playoffs. Like, that's asking too much of Austin. But if he's a secondary guy, I think he's fine as a defender. And he rates out pretty well for what it's worth on B-Ball Index. But I don't think Rui's overrated per se. I just think there's maybe an overlooking of his weaknesses and what the Lakers need with the starters. Shibugan, maybe you've covered it. Do you think Luka's defensive improvement shown at Eurobasket is something we'll see in the NBA? Yes. I'm a little skeptical, to be completely honest. So I think that Luka, and I made this point last year, I don't think Luka is some sieve defensively. Like, I think at times, especially in the playoffs, he was picked on, and there will be some matchups where he's just too slow to defend. And maybe that, I think that's changed a bit with him being in better shape, but clearly in the playoffs, there were times where guys on the weak side, he would rotate over and they would just blow by him, right? So that's something I think will be better. I don't think Luka is going to be like, I just frankly, and I got some flack for this last time from some Eurobasket watchers. Like, we can debate the schematics and the quality of play in Eurobasket versus the NBA, but like NBA athletes are just, and certainly there are some NBA athletes in Eurobasket, but like NBA players are just more athletic, quicker, faster. Like that's just, it is what it is. Like that is the difference between the NBA and every other league. So regardless of, I'm not talking skill or talent or ability, but like it's different if Luka's guarding guys who are closer to him in athleticism than some of the players he's defending at the NBA level. So I do think it's probably easier for him to stay with certain guys on ball and just, on drives and stuff compared to NBA. Like there's no Ant Edwards in Eurobasket. So like it's a different type of ask defensively. So I also think with Luka, like, throughout the course of a season, you just got to pick your spots sometimes defensively as a superstar. And like, I think he'll pick his spots and that's just how it goes. But I am encouraged by the spirit that he defended. Like, I think that's the big thing is like, if he's playing up and getting into guys and like animated on that end, I would love to see that. So I think some of it will translate, but I don't want to lie to you and just be like, oh, I think Luka's like a stopper now, or he's going to be some like great defender who's making this big impact. Like, I think part of it was circumstantial. And there also is just like a different, like Eurobasket it's almost playoff level basketball, right? In that intensity, we're not going to see that for 82 games necessarily. Like maybe come playoff time, we'll see the ramp up, but it's also just different circumstances. John, think Horford and Melton will get sick of waiting for the Warriors and sign with the Lakers? No. 2 reasons. 1, money. They're supposed to get more money than, Melton, we don't have great clarity, and part of it depends on the Kuminga contract, but in theory, they're both getting more than minimum contracts with Golden State. Maybe Melton's getting a minimum, but again, they have multiple guys that are waiting on the Kuminga situation. 2, the Lakers have an empty roster spot, but they don't have the money to take in someone else. So actually to sign a 15th player, the Lakers would have to shed some salary to fit them under the first apron unless they wait. There's a date in January where it offsets. But so yeah, I don't see Horford or Melton being Lakers. In defense of the genre, 1022, a t-shirt with Jovan sitting at the top of Staples, like the Views cover. I like that. I like that a lot. So I will pitch it to the person I'm talking with, and we'll see how that goes. Mistra, Jovan, how realistic is getting a wing or two from the Rockets? I think very unrealistic. I don't see like teams that are in competition for or are they going to trade DFS back to Houston, right? Like but when you're a contender or in that mix, like you're not trading with the enemy. Roberto Carlos, I don't think Luka showed anything defensively at Eurobasket that he hasn't shown before. TBH, he's always been good at generating steals, but he's way too slow laterally to ever be a true positive. I agree on the steal. Like he's always been in that 1.5 to 2. And even I've made that point throughout the season. Like I don't think Luka's as bad defensively as some people paint him out as. And I think the court mapping and the basketball IQ that he has offensively that makes him such a special and unique offensive talent applies defensively. And he could read the offense and what they're doing and where to be. And I think as a help defender, he's strong. He has really good hands. He has really good awareness and anticipation. So he's an effective help defender who can be disruptive and play passing lanes and get steals and deflections and whatnot. To your point, though, I think the difference was he seemed to be in better shape defensively, just overall, but also defensively. And I felt like there was I would recommend go back and watch my Luka film breakdown from about a month or so ago. There's some clips in there where like Luka's not picking up guys at half court as a Laker. That's just not how he was defending. So there are plays where he's picking up guys at half court and he's blitzing and he's playing with a certain verve and a certain just spirit to his defensive play that I don't think we saw consistently with the Lakers. So I would push back a little bit here and say, like, I think there was some subtle differences, but in general, I'm with you that like, I don't think there's like this substantial change to his defensive game. Like, I think he's ultimately going to be a negative on the ball and a positive off the ball. And then you just navigate that. And that's why, again, you play him off ball against non-threats. Dylan the Villain Brooks, welcome back, Dylan. Dylan is one of my, we'll say, sometimes antagonizers in the chat, but that's all love here with the late night gang. So this is a good point, and I'm gonna dissect this for a sec. It says Marcus isn't the same anymore. Plus, he's not a 3-point threat. How can you have him as a 3-and-D wing? He's too small to guard wings. The first part is notable. Marcus is only had one above average 3-point shooting season. Now, the real culprit or the real reason behind that is because he loves pull-up threes. And if you look at Marcus's shooting splits year over year, and I went through and looked at every single year of his career, there's always a big difference between his catch and shooting and his pull-up threes. And as a pull-up 3-point shooter, he tends to be under 30% or around 30%. As a catch and shoot guy, he fluctuates for sure. Like I'm not saying he's a consistent shooter, but he's had seasons where he's above average. He's close to 40%, like high 30s. So I actually think if he cuts back on the ball handling and the Lakers reduce his offensive role and offensive ask, and it's more so as a spot up catch and shoot off ball guy, I actually think based on his track record, he can have a season where he's an above average to even good catch and shoot spot up guy. So that part I think is really dependent on role and buy-in with Marcus. In terms of the defensive end, the 3 players that Marcus has defended, you go through, NBA.com has the tracking and the matchup data defensively. It's imperfect, but it's one of the best things we have to go off of. The 3 players Marcus has spent the most collective time on over the past 2 seasons, and I don't remember the exact order, but I'll just give you the top 3. Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Lauri Markkanen. All 3 of those guys are 6'7" and above. All 3 of those guys are a solid like 230, 240 and above. So I actually, the point I made with Marcus, and I made it in the film breakdown I did, which I also recommend you check out, I'm actually more afraid of Marcus defending guards or defending specifically point guards than I am Marcus guarding up and defending wings. I actually think if you look at Marcus's matchup data and who he's defended best, he defends up more recently. And part of that circumstance, he played in Memphis next to Bane and Ja, so they needed him to defend wings. And Washington is Washington, and it was a bit of a circus over there. So, like, who knows? Like, he was just defending whoever. But I actually think Marcus has lost his speed and athleticism a bit, partly due to injury and aging. And if you look at how he guards the Ja Morant, De'Aaron Fox types, that actually concerns me more compared to him guarding some of these bigger guys. So like with Luka, LeBron, and Lauri Markkanen, those are all forward-sized ball handlers who are like the point guard primary option for their teams, but those are bigger guys. So I think with Marcus, actually, like if you average out his average player he's defending, he defends like threes the most. He's primarily morphed into being a small forward defensively, more so than a point of attack guy. I actually have concern over the point of attack. I just think looking at all the Lakers options, he's still probably the best one. So my fear with Marcus is not him guarding wings or even some bigs. My fear with Marcus is him guarding guards, actually. And it's a bit counterintuitive, especially based on who he used to be. But if you look at the shift in his career as he's aged and dealt with more injuries, he's gotten slower. The hip mobility, the agility isn't quite there. So I actually think Marcus, we see it with some guys. Like I think Patrick Beverley was another guy like this who started out as a point of attack guy. And then as they got deeper into their career, they started to defend up a little bit better. We saw Lakers have Pat guard like threes and fours. And but even Pat versus Marcus is a good 2 or 3 inches bigger than him, good 30, 40 pounds on him. Like Marcus is a big dude. Marcus is 6'3", 230, 235. Like he's a big boy. Young Lido, is a Doof Thero healthy yet? Yes, to my knowledge, but I guess we'll see. King Carter, favorite Drake album cover has to be Take Care. That's also the best Drake album. Kevin Cambridge, Lakers have any shot at Keon Ellis? They have a shot, but it's a tough. I mean, maybe there's something with Keon Ellis and Dalton, I guess, in theory, but I really like Keon Ellis. Greg King, will Dalton crack the rotation this year? I think he will. My guess is the Lakers go with 11 guys in the regular season, including Dalton and a center as the 10th and 11th guy. And then when they scale back the rotation, I do have some concerns, but we'll see. Mishra, he's more of a 2 and D guard. I think he's more of a wing than a guard, to be completely honest. But again, I think the Lakers have some. I still think, I'll say this. I think the ideal fourth player next to the big three is not on the roster right now. Sky Falcon 5, you think Kessler actually makes it to restricted free agency? Would you give him something like 4-100 or extend Ayton if he has a good season? I think Kessler is better and younger than Ayton. I'd rather have Kessler, much better defensive player, but also in the same ballpark as a finisher. Is a little bit bigger, but I think he's a better rebounder and defender, and I just would straight up rather have Kessler. Does he make it to restricted free agency? I think so, but I like seems to be some hardball going on. So maybe Utah caves and ends up paying him, but seems like, I mean, they have no incentive to really do that other than goodwill and just, procedural business operations. I would be open to extending Ayton if he has a good season. Kevin Cambridge, Jovan, are you planning on doing film breakdowns during the season? I found your videos on Marcus Smart and Jake Laravia to be really insightful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, I am. The one thing that I'm trying to figure out with that, and this might be something I figure out with the partnership and sponsorship side, is my film breakdowns get flagged by YouTube for copyright because I'm using game clips, and then those episodes don't get monetized. So now that I am on my own and every video matters in terms of monetization and just like the business side of things, having videos that don't get monetized is, especially because those videos have tended to do really well. And it's unfortunate that I get the slap on the wrist. So that's one consideration that I'm currently weighing, of just like maybe those end up being sponsored videos. So I'm still getting paid for them, but not through YouTube. But definitely open to doing more film breakdowns, and like want to do at least once a month, if not more frequently. All right, catching up on the chat here. Fred D. Sanders, keep up the good work, Jovan. Thank you. I appreciate it. Cole Sturgill, both Kessler and Ayton on the same roster would be highly unlikely, correct? Virtually 0%. Yeah, it would not make much sense. Like, those two guys can't play together, and committing, I mean, I assume Ayton's going to get paid more by the Lakers or someone else after this contract. I think Kessler's certainly going to get paid more. So paying like 45, 50 plus million to two centers doesn't really make sense. Kevin Cambridge, make sure to drop a like on the video, guys. There's 304 of us watching and only 95 likes. Yeah. So this is my first time doing this on X. I wonder if that affects the YouTube numbers, because typically we're in the thousands on YouTube and we're on the thousands on X. So that's, wonder if there's a little bit of difference there, but appreciate you all for tuning in, and yeah, hit that like button. Also hit the subscribe button if you've not yet done so. Herman Williams, who's your ideal non-star player to put on the team? I think like the Herb Jones, Jalen Suggs, depending on how you want to label those guys. I think that player archetype next to the big three. The two concerns with both guys, the two concerns with both is health and shooting. I'm trying to think of I guess like a Derek White type also works, but some sort of, I like Tamani Kamara, but he's impossible to get right now, I think, from Portland. But some sort of like guy who could at least be a league average, if not ideally above league average 3-point shooter, and then defend like a menace and be like an all defense caliber guy. So I'm willing to live with a little bit worse shooting for like elite defense. And that's where I think Suggs and Herb Jones both check that box, but both guys have extensive injury histories and both guys are shaky shooters. So that does complicate things. I do think both guys have things offensively they can do that offset it. Like, I don't think it's like a Vando situation. Like, they're both better shooters than Vando, but also, especially with Suggs, I think he could do more offensively than Herb. But Rod, who is the Drake among the people who cover the Lakers? Come on, man. You know who it is. It's your boy. It's your boy. Humbly. David Parks, hello, Jovan. Keep up the great work. What do you think about this trade idea? Vincent, Vanderbilt, Cleveland connect to the Pelicans for Murray, Misi, and Matkovic. Or Matkovic. So this is DeJounte Murray. Misi. I would do it. If you're the Pelicans, I guess you're getting off. What's Murray's contract? I forget. Because he signed the extension. Murray's got 3 more years left. But in the low 30s, that's reasonable. I mean, I'll say my concern with this trade, like if we're looking at it through a vacuum, I think it's an upgrade for the Lakers. I think the issue is adding Murray to Luka, LeBron, and Reeves. Now I think you have just another high-level ball handler, starter guy who like just is best with the ball in his hands. So it's like, I think at some point there's diminishing returns there. And I don't think he's the level of a shooter where he could exclusively, you'd be like, all right, DeJounte, you're 4th in the pecking order, or maybe you're 3rd and Austin takes a step back. But like, I think he would want the ball more than would be realistic. So, but Misi, Lakers were high on Misi. That was a guy they were considering. And I would be open to figuring out some sort of Misi trade if I'm the Lakers. Kevin Cambridge about to dip, but thank you for the coverage. Have a blessed night, Jovan. Shout out to Kevin. Shout out to everybody. I will, Roberto says Murray's defensive rep is living off a season that happened like 7 years ago, and Misi was also a very bad defender last year, but rookie tax. Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic on Misi. I know statistically, I think there were some things to be optimistic about with him. Kurt Affair says, can confirm Drip Show is an amazing graphic artist and it has unparalleled merch. I will check him out. I will say again, I think you guys are going to like the person I'm collabing with. Oh, I missed this. Appetizers and sushi. Thank you for the super chat. JJ didn't lead us to the Western Conference Finals. That's unfair to Ham. I don't really want to rehash the Darvin stuff. I've talked about this before. The two things I guess I'll say quickly because I can't help myself. That like the Western Conference Finals thing was awesome. And that was Darvin as a rookie head coach. That was an incredible debut. And at the time, I, as well as most people at the Lakers, didn't really have much to criticize with Darvin. They thought the start of the Denver series was a little weird, going with the small group that closed against Golden State. I think that kind of cost them. I don't know if it cost them game 1, but it definitely got them off to a slow start in game 1. Like they shouldn't have been starting 3 guards against Denver. But there wasn't much to criticize with Darvin in year 1. It was year 2 when he overthought the process with benching Austin early, then eventually benching D'Lo, minimizing Rui and having him permanently buried behind Taurean Prince. It was like, there was so many basic decisions that I think there was a fundamental misunderstanding of who, like, I think if you surveyed the fan base and the media and people around like if you got a consensus, an external consensus over who the top 9 players were on that team and the order of those 9 players, I think the coaching staff or at least Darvin would have a very different list of the top 9. And I think there was a fundamental misunderstanding of the team and what they needed to do and how they needed to play. And like, I just think it went off the rails. And regardless of what I think or what other people think, and obviously he's gotten a lot of criticism, the key was like he started to lose the locker room over the second half of the season. I reported on that with Shams at the time. At the end of you had the playoff series, and AD calls him out subtly, or the coaching staff, and that they were unprepared against. Like there's a lot of frustration with the Denver situation of they kept losing to Denver in the same way. So there will be a different tune with JJ if the Lakers lose to Minnesota again, and like there will be the pitchforks for JJ at some point from people. And if he's worthy of more criticism, I will be transparent about that. But I think with Darvin, it went like people, I think, sometimes cherry pick the Western Conference Finals. It's like, all right, let's talk about the second season, because yes, the first season was an unequivocal success. He led it a 7th seed to the Western Conference Finals. The second season was a disaster, and he lost key. Like, when you lose the locker room, there's really no coming back from that. Like, that's a impossible. You can't win back the locker room. That's really hard to do. So, like, once the players tune you out, they tune you out, and it's your job. That's your survival as a coach, is keeping the players checked in to what you're doing. And once they check out on you, it's over. That's just what it is. Drip Show, I see now, super chat. What's a good way to contact you so we could send you a Drip Show canvas gift? I appreciate it. Do yobuads@gmail.com. So JOBUADS@gmail. That is work email for me. So do that one. Aaron, thank you for the super chat. Better fit for this Lakers team, Dillon Brooks or Andrew Wiggins? Keep up the great work. I'm going to give you two answers here. I think Andrew Wiggins is the better fit and the better player. However, if Dillon Brooks were to ever fully buy into his offensive role and not take some of the wild shots and just like hijack possessions, I think Dillon Brooks can be a more impactful defender and is someone who can defend up a little bit more than Wiggins can. But I think for being more of a point of attack, like guard guy, I think Wiggins is quicker and more athletic and can do that job better than Brooks can. I think he's overall just a better player. But Brooks, with his shooting, when again, he's taking good shots, and his defensive physicality and tenacity, like I think that's another guy that I think there is like the version of Dillon Brooks that has the breakthrough as like a championship level 3-and-D guy. I think there's that guy in there. I just think he wants to play a certain way and sometimes gets in his own way. All right, I'm going to wrap here. Young Lido asks, has Day'Ron Sharpe signed yet? Yes, he re-signed in Brooklyn. I'm going to wrap here. I went over, as we tend to do here. 5 minutes turns into 30, and that is why I partnered with Rose Sparks. But appreciate you all on X and YouTube for tuning in. I will have an episode coming out tomorrow with Sean Davis. We are recording tonight, talking through fleshing out some of the things we learned or didn't learn today, and talking through training camp battles. And so excited for that episode of Buha's Block to drop tomorrow. But shout out to everybody on X. I am now going to start streaming directly to X as well, and do X and YouTube. But appreciate you all. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. Let's hit 30K before the season starts. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. And for those tuning in on X, make sure you hit that follow button if you have not yet done so. I'll talk to you all soon. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Appreciate you.